things that happen in India don't exist in Australia. I'm really following people with my eye and looking at faces and trying to get that split second of people exploding with emotion. Holi really is the most joyous occasion. I've been doing it over 30 years. I can still remember the vitality and the wonderment on the very first time I went to the villages. Feeling the huge drum that was being beaten, the music sort of came through my feet and up through my body, and I was still there when I woke up in the morning. So the villages had a really big impact on me. Many photographers have come to India, but I think that there's a certain beauty in staying around for so long and being accepted as I am in this town. To document is really to create history. I'm recording something that I'm believing in. I'm here to try to preserve what I find is beautiful, to evoke emotion in people's minds. I was invited back to London about 5 years ago to see an exhibition of London's top photographers, and I looked at all the work and thought, well, if this is what it is, I think I was lucky to be there in the 80s because there was much more stimulus. People love to come to my studio because of the atmosphere. We were really trying to create a different space in which something different would come out. Growing up in Australia and then having this, you know, freedom, we could just go ballistic. I wrote a letter to my mother and I said, I could walk down King's Road without any clothes on and nobody would blink an eyelid.
Worldwide, in the 70s, the whole interest had moved to New York, to the Warhol, to the factory and everything, which is why I loved London, because it kind of got ignored. So great things were happening underground. So Robyn was really part of this. And she was willing to experiment, we all were. You were always exchanging ideas. It was a magical time.
When I saw her working in London, it's difficult because the major personalities of designers, etc., all have a strong agenda of their own. And she had her agenda, but she did make it work.
Just using the body and the face as a canvas, we wanted people to stop and say, OK, is that real or is it makeup? Before the computer really came into being, all of the things that are easily available now on Photoshop, we didn't have then. Everything we did was done on camera, and if I carefully lit them using black velvet, we could lose the top of somebody's head or pieces of their arms.
Let's say they laid siege to the body and they dissembled the body. Scarlett is twisted like a cartoon. Bill Gibb, the great knitting designer, he is a grand Roman emperor. Sir Roy Strong, V&A director, he is an Arcimbaldo painting, using light of all his interests, gardening, writing, the books. The cleverness of this was they would turn the person into the person's own history.
Robyn, I think, is at heart a surrealist. There's always a little tweak involved in something there. And that's her genius, really. And you'll see something that you think, oh, how did that get in there? Leigh, well, he just turned up. The first costume we ever wore was in the Old Gentleman's World 1985.
Leigh Bowery is the most ferocious critic of society. He was in a rage against discrimination. He reinvented a Krishna god as a kind of immigrant Pakistani. The crazy black and white spectacles and eye makeup, that looked to me as if he'd been looking at sculptures of Krishna. Leigh Bowery and Robyn, two Australians in London, relatively unself-conscious and uninhibited, valuing high saturated colour, valuing light. I like to think that that is Australian.
This is the magic chair. So these are all dads.
Nice close-up,
Yes.
wide angle sort of.
Yeah.
Now, were these just on a box brownie?
No. He had a Voigtlander that I remember.
But you see, when I'm looking back through now Dad's pictures of us, you know, that's where we got the gene from his love of photography.
She was 4 years younger than me, and Jeff was in the middle of us exactly. We used to run down to the bush. We would be gone for 8 hours. We'd swim, there were water holes. I left school when I was 15, as did Robyn.
So then I started learning photography with Grant Mudford, who was doing fabulous surrealistic pictures for Pol magazine, and a huge jolt into what I could experience. And that's Zandra and Grant, so that must be about 77. So I landed in London and wanted to work for Harry Pecinotti. So that's Harry when I started working. Who shot fashion, but he also shot arts and crafts. And he was in Thurlow Square. So I had all of these breaks where I ended up in one of those studios.
Zandra, she'd known from the beginning through Grant Mumford, who was actually a boyfriend of Zandra's.
We'd start at like 9 o'clock in the morning and heavily disguise me, and I'd be propped up so that I didn't fall asleep and move the makeup. The Nefertiti image, my whole face was recreated so that the camera disguised all the bits so that I didn't have the nose I've got, but it was all painted out. Robyn went on to experiment with a Stephen Jones hat.
The hat was so wonderful. I was really able to get a fantastic shadow happening. Shot a Polaroid, gave it to the makeup artist and said, do all of the shadows in makeup. And then I relit it and created an illusion. So our work was always trying to do something which made people look. In about the mid-80s, after that Shadows photograph came out, everybody was booking me to do ads for the big makeup houses, Max Factor and Revlon and Boots. And so I became Flavour of the Month.
Beauty, wonder, courage, machine.
Now magazine said, would I create a look for the 80s?
It's very much about geometric abstraction. And it is as if there are thoughts running around, you know, in all sorts of directions. References to computer systems, urban society, a very intriguing way of interpreting a decade.
David Bowie said, I want 6 people fully dressed in that religious kind of gothic look. They did that video, Ashes to Ashes. They started a club towards the end of 1979 called the Blitz. Steve Strange went on the door dressed up and said, you can't come in unless you're dressed up. Well, it was just fabulous. Steve Strange loved to be photographed, and so he would be in my studio at least 3 times a week in a new look. Fade to grey comes from that. The whole scene was really being fueled by what was happening on the street, what you could see on a newsstand, what we were doing in the studios, creating spectacle.
The Alternativist world I describe as a surreal art event for all-round family entertainment. And it's based on Cruft's dog show.
Receive our first ever glimpse of our host and hostess of the world's mightiest battle of beauty, Alternative Miss World.
The first event was in 1972, and I did 12 since then. It has cabaret, and it's a thing about transformation. You can transform yourself from a human being into a washing machine. I come as the host and hostess, split down the middle.
Welcome to the Alternative Miss World 1986.
And Robyn photographed the event.
It was just mayhem backstage. They were competing against each other, either in front of my camera or in being able to tolerate the most booze or drugs. And so the whole atmosphere was absolutely just madness.
She documented all the fashion shows, she did the front of house. She was dynamite. Robyn's drive in documentation, I would say, it's always been there. She'd go back to the dark room and she'd be processing all these photographs, and then she's off again to the next shoot, and amazing, this energy. When she chose to do Zandra's book, she photographed these costumes from above. She made them look exquisite, like butterflies.
We put together the book, recording all of my work for posterity in a way that no other designer has had their work recorded. In 1980, I went on a trip to India, and it was so spectacular and so amazing.
She told me about the blue gods, and she had lots of those postcards. And she wanted to look a bit like Krishna. She had Aditi, creative power, written across her forehead.
And then Andrew invited Robyn to go to India, so it was Robyn's introduction to India.
I got off the plane in Bombay on a return trip from Sydney. Journeyed up to Rajasthan, and Andrew Logan said we should experience Holi. And then we ended up in this village where buckets of coloured water being poured over us, and such joy and gaiety that I haven't experienced ever before in my life. We'd put on white clothes, Jackson Pollock appeared everywhere, handprints.
They came along with me on this processional festival, which travels from one village to another village, with the full explosions of color, music, dance, dramas, flowers, and everything. And they were taken in. Their ecstasies exploded. They were really hooked.
I don't think she knew she was going to find all that stuff in India, but I'm sure she recognised it on that very, very first trip. When you look at the way they make each other up for the Indian festivals, it's not unlike what Robyn's been doing.
I thought, this is just fantastic. I spend hours trying to get this in the studio, and here it is, just happening every minute, changing. That's beautiful, the portraiture you can do at Holi. It's just instantaneous. I'm looking at it from a Western viewpoint of seeing contemporary photography reenacted within traditional scenes. The next day we had to go straight from the plane to the catwalk, and I still had pink hair and still alive with all of this colour. So I can only say it was like a kaleidoscope, or like some fantastic jewel that I had entered into. I had one foot in India and one foot in London, and I made 13 visits in 5 years. Every time that I would go back there, I would be led on a pilgrimage. Coming back, my studio turned into a very Indian environment. There was things from Holi appearing everywhere. I was really interested in colour, in light. It dawned on me that I wasn't feeling very fulfilled in commercial advertising photography. The Eastern culture was filling up a gap. The politics of the country under Margaret Thatcher were making a mark. and our mortgage went up and work dried up for freelance people. London was paling, really. I had already embraced Hinduism and received an Indian name and experiencing the religious practices. I knew I was seriously fascinated in it. So I decided to move.
Probably she made a very stupid mistake of giving up that very lucrative situation and come here and live without any source of income. But that was a step towards self-realization, towards happiness and more completeness.
But the thing that interested me about the ashram where I'm living, that it was being shared by many, many different international professors and universities as the place to actually study something to do with performance or music or traditional ritual. I landed in the best spot that I could have done. Now, seva is service in Hindi, and it means that I work for no remuneration. Everything that I do here, it's coming from me, my heart, that I want to give it. It's like a fabulous barter system. I evade the criticism that might be thrown at me that, oh, look at the foreigner making money out of us. The elders of the villages I've been working in are no more. The motor car has come, and so everything is really rapidly changing. And I look back at what I have photographed. Really, you aren't able to get it today.
Being Krishna's birthplace, I always think of it as the Jerusalem of India. I don't know how many thousands of Krishna temples there are here, but it's mind-boggling. All of the legends and stories begin here, and I think you could live here forever and still just scratch the surface.
I think Krishna spent no time in stealing Robyn Beeche's heart. So she is trapped. Trapped in the sense of when you are trapped in the arms of your lover.
Because he was the supreme lover, he could multiply himself and give every lady pleasure. Then it seemed like he was the Casanova of India, basically. So why not?
I think maybe it was a transition moment in Robyn's life. She was ready to move on to the next square. And I think the spontaneity of her photographs now are fabulous.
Holi in Braj happens at the first signs of spring. You feel it building up and then it explodes into this real fantastic thing of colour. I've been surprised over many, many years at the intensity of the devotion and the passion in which Holi is played. It's basically still the same excitement and still the same build-up of I know what I want to do this year, which will be different to what I did last year. It's a bit like the Paris fashion shows. It's a bit like trying to get into Jean-Paul Gaultier or Issey Miyake. For years and years and years, you had to fight for your space on the edge of the catwalk, and I was the only woman. the press guys were really big guys, and they used to say, get in the middle of us and we'll just barge and go through this door. And so we'd go in. It's a bit like that, getting into Dowji. This year we might not get in. All I can think of is my guru saying, okay, without pain. One of the great things about shooting Holi is the unexpected that might happen to you. And everybody is in this high state of elation. Cartier-Bresson, I loved him growing up learning about photography because he was capturing a split second in life. Well, if there's any split second to capture, it's at Holi, because it really is a fragment of an explosion of excitement and colour that can come at you from any direction.
As a scholar, she goes deeper, so she unravels its meaning and documents it. Also sees it as an anthropologist who is not just recording a fading phenomenon, but deeply concerned about its reinvention.
This archive I helped to create in 1992 when I came to live permanently in Vrindavan. Many scholars come. My documentary sense of photography has really made me want to record as much as I can to portray really the feeling of how it was at that time. Either the shock or the horror or the happiness or sadness that I experienced when taking these photographs. Farlan is the absolute epiphany of shooting Holi because it is the most terrifying thing to watch. It is the most difficult thing to photograph in my life. The fire builds up to a huge crescendo before he runs. This man is probably the bravest man I've ever known because he's running into a wall of fire. The hairs on the back of your neck are standing up because I'm in so much fear that he's going to perish.
What she conveys in her photographs is how the people themselves are responding to the religious moment of it. And I think as foreigners, we need to be very aware that what we see as fabulous theatre are in fact religious experiences for the people who are attending them. And Robyn is very good at that. She's very respectful. She understands where the people are coming from.
There are certain times when the gods are buried in flower petals, where everything comes to such a pinnacle. The five senses are just heightened to such a degree that you think that's the best I've ever experienced. But then something else will bowl you over. When you see people crying with happiness for the first time, then it can't help but reverberate. This is why people come to sacred places and doing pilgrimage.
When you repeat a legend or it's passed down year after year, it inevitably changes. Robyn's photographs document that.
I was really looking for the faces that I knew so well. They'll be saying things to the men opposite them that they only say at that particular time of year. So that's what I'm trying to convey, the bond and rabble that goes on. These men I've been photographing for over 30 years.
the work that she was doing, documenting the different festivals, particularly Holi, how much that is changing. So already in 25, 30 years, that work has already got a sort of historical importance. Her work in India is seen very much in terms of the service that she does to the ashram. What gives it its vitality, I think. That image of the elephant really sticks in your head. I can't get it out. It's so painterly, it's so extraordinary. And then you look back to the 80s to see the importance of that early work. I think it's a continuum for Robyn, and that sort of love of beauty is all through the work. It just manifests a little bit differently these days. Her work is starting to be seen in India. People are putting those two parts of her life together.
In Australia, she's just being recognised. I mean, in the last few years. It's come to Robyn later in her life because she never sought notoriety. And she's now being collected, of course.
She has what it takes to be an artist. Her imagination flies, her emotions are pure.
When a person like Robyn is capturing that divine moment of creativity as an act of love, the photograph becomes the conduit for the real experience.
She loves the life, I think. She's found her soul place.
It was parallel to my life in UK. It was a spectacle, it was theatrical, there was a presence of the unknown.
You see a photograph by her and your heart goes into the photograph. She's dedicated her life to it.
I live my life with whatever comes along, comes along. If it's a plane ticket to Australia, if it's in a temple in 10 minutes' time, I'm just free. As long as I can walk and hold a camera, I'll be shooting. Who knows?